NASA Ames Research Center, Moffett Field, California. On December 5, 2011, astronomers working with the Kepler Space Telescope announced the discovery of a planet they called Kepler-22b, orbiting within what's known as the habitable zone of a distant star.
Today's discovery is a tantalizing indication that, with time, Kepler may find true Earth analogs.
Kepler-22b is about 600 light years away from Earth, so that's a long way. But it is, in fact, in an orbit that means that the daytime temperatures on that planet might be comparable to a summer in San Francisco. So that's the first time we found a planet that might have liquid oceans, maybe a thick atmosphere, maybe even life.
What we'd ultimately like to do first is just understand how other planetary systems are made up. But then we really would like to find Earth-like planets. Planets in the habitable zone of sun-like stars.
But is it possible that NASA scientists have been searching for life they already know exists? Some believe previous voyages into space have uncovered evidence of an extraterrestrial presence.
Houston, Discovery, how do you read, over?
Discovery, Houston, read you loud and clear.
Go for main engine start. Main engines up and burning. 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
On September 12, 1991, the Space Shuttle Discovery, STS-48, flew nearly 350 miles above the surface of the Earth. Its crew, led by Captain John Creighton, performed several missions, including the deployment of an upper atmosphere research satellite.
Use go for free drift. Okay, we're in free drift.
But while the astronauts occupied themselves with various tasks, a video camera at the rear cargo bay door captured footage that NASA claims no longer exists. But a number of amateurs that were monitoring the transmission produced what they allege is genuine footage from STS-48. The video shows what appears to be a series of unidentified glowing objects and flashing lights that change direction and accelerate rapidly.
Apparently, the space shuttle was surrounded by some kind of UFO, a flying saucer type of craft. Some kind of a shield at one point was supposedly put around the shuttle, briefly. And then the UFO and everything disappeared.
One of the astronauts openly states over an open channel, hey, we're being tracked by an alien spacecraft. And then all of a sudden, all the transmission just ceases. And I think what happened was that he must have realized he was on the public channel, not the private channel, and he probably very, very quickly switched over to the private channel to describe what it was he was seeing.
I knew everyone, and I heard stories from everyone. Nobody brought me any evidence. So, one side of the coin, it's everywhere out there. Has it been here? I have no evidence.
NASA officials claim the video images show ice particles glinting in the sun. But is it possible that video transmissions from the space shuttle captured more than what NASA officials want to admit?
Occasionally, shuttle astronauts will report that they've seen things or experienced things in space that they can't explain and that might be due to an alien presence.
Ever since humankind launched itself into space, there have been reports where astronauts describe something that they saw while being up in the spaceship. And we have to remind ourselves that those stories are reported by astronauts and not by insane people.
Huntsville, Alabama, July 24th, 1969. A crowd of thousands gathers in Courthouse Square to cheer on the triumphant return of Dr. Wernher von Braun, just hours after Apollo 11's Columbia Command Module splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. The United States had achieved what many believed was impossible, putting a man on the moon. The picture ran in newspapers around America the following day, celebrating the genius rocket engineer who was behind it all.
Von Braun is a titan, he's one of the major figures of the last century, and he was way ahead of his time.
Von Braun adamantly believed that humanity's future was in space. He's the greatest voice we've had in the history of the space program.
Considered by NASA to be the father of rocket science, von Braun is credited with either inventing or helping to develop many of the most sophisticated aerial technologies that exist today, like the supersonic anti-aircraft missile, the ballistic missile, the first American satellite, and the first U.S. space vehicles, including the enormous Saturn V rocket that enabled man to reach the moon.
Without exaggeration, the Apollo program has been called the greatest achievement that mankind has ever accomplished. Without Wernher von Braun, we would not reach the moon. To date, the Saturn V is the most powerful rocket that we've ever built.
Von Braun's incredible engineering feats were matched only by his all-consuming crusade to send man into space. But who exactly was this engineering genius with such extraordinary visions for the future? Wernher von Braun was born March 23, 1912, in a small town in eastern Prussia, the second of three sons. Wernher grew up a child of wealth and privilege, but while he was born into an accomplished family, Wernher's keen intellect and unusual passions stood out. His father once said, "I don't know where his talent comes from," and stated on more than one occasion that he considered his son a mystery.
Wernher von Braun was multi-talented. Both sides of his brain were working. He could think about technical things and imagine rocketry and space travel, but he was an accomplished musician. And these traits manifested very early. I think his parents knew by the time he was 4 or 5 that he was very special. His mother gave him a telescope when he was young, and he looked at the moon and said, "I want to go there. I want to build the machine that will go to the moon." And of course he did, half a century later.
The achievement of putting a man on the moon is something that was, at the time, really almost impossible and almost unthinkable. Wernher von Braun was obsessed with going to the moon and going to Mars from the time he was a little boy, and that was his destiny.
In his teens, von Braun wrote papers on orbital flight, and by the incredibly young age of 20, he was named the head of Germany's rocket program by Army Artillery Officer Captain Walter Dornberger.
When he worked towards one of his goals, he would apply himself and master a subject in very short order. He had been trained as an engineer, and doing a PhD in physics is not trivial, and he got his PhD at an age when most German students were still undergraduates.
But how is it that Wernher von Braun, whose contemporaries included such scientific geniuses as Nikola Tesla, Robert Oppenheimer, and Albert Einstein, was so far ahead of everyone when it came to rocketry? And what was behind his obsession to travel to the stars? Some ancient astronaut theorists believe that the boy genius may have been guided by otherworldly forces.
Maybe he drew his inspiration from science fiction. Maybe it came from his own imagination and vision of what the future should be. Or maybe it was inspired by something extraterrestrial.
Some sort of extraterrestrial contact might have happened with Wernher von Braun. Something or someone might have reached him and saw where we needed to go as a civilization and gave him the tools and the insights that he needed to be able to build our way out into space.
Some have suggested that people like Albert Einstein, Tesla, that they've had this extraterrestrial intervention, that they have had access to this abundance of knowledge. And the question has arisen, did Wernher von Braun, was he also one of them? Because the vision he had, the ideas were incredible for their time.
On February 19th, 2015, NASA's Dawn spacecraft sent back to Earth images of mysterious bright lights reflecting off the surface of a dwarf planet called Ceres. While some scientists have suggested that the lights are the result of something natural, like an ice field or escaping gas, higher resolution images have failed to uncover the true cause of the reflections. 4 months later in June, the Dawn spacecraft captured even more incredible images. Images that reveal what looks like a 3-mile tall pyramid.
These are possibly technological structures. So this brings up the question, is it possible that these were built by extraterrestrials? Instead of looking at the creation myths from Sumer as mythology, maybe this is scientific data that we should be revisiting.
Might further exploration of Ceres reveal evidence that it once served as refuge for the survivors of an alien war? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and claim that according to the Sumerian texts, these warring extraterrestrial factions also took refuge on another planet, Earth. And they propose that stories found throughout the world of gods waging battle in the skies suggest that this otherworldly conflict continued once the survivors reached their new home planet.
All over the world, we're seeing evidence of these ancient wars that took place. They took place in Greece, they took place in Norse mythology, all throughout Mesoamerican symbolism. And consistently, what we're seeing is some sort of battle for control over the Earth.
When you look at many of these ancient tales, it would seem to be that the gods are warring amongst themselves over us.
This lends to an intriguing possibility that we are the descendants of the winners, and that there are certain groups that are pushing for us and really rallying because, in fact, we are their direct descendants. They created us through some sort of genetic engineering. And then there's other factions that want to wipe us off the face of the Earth completely, and those wars may still be being fought right now.
Are humans the descendants of a race of alien beings whose home planet was destroyed thousands of years ago? Might the ancient stories of warring gods really be accounts of separate extraterrestrial factions that were fighting for control of the Earth and may still be fighting for it today? July 20th, 1976. NASA's unmanned Viking 1 orbiter and lander touches down on the surface of Mars. 3 weeks later, it is joined by its companion, the Viking 2. For the first time ever, humanity has established a presence on another planet.
The Viking landers actually landed on Mars and took a sample, but they landed in one spot, and they stayed in one spot. We've since sent the Pathfinder Sojourner. For the first time, we have a system on Mars that if we see something shiny over there and we want to go check it out, we'll send the rover and get a very close look at it, take samples, get high-definition video from it, and that is a very good start for figuring out where people need to go when we get ready to send them there.
In 2012, the Curiosity rover landed on Mars's Gale crater. It was the most ambitious Mars mission flown by NASA to date.
Touchdown confirmed. Proceed on Mars.
One of its objectives was to gather data that will help scientists determine what is needed to make the planet more habitable for human exploration. In June 2018, scientist and aerospace engineer Dr. Travis Taylor traveled to Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. There, he met with NASA Exploration Mission scientist, Dr. Elizabeth Rampey. Dr. Rampey analyzes data obtained by the Mars Curiosity rover, which 6 years into its mission is sending back some of its most extraordinary findings yet.
So there was very late-breaking news recently from the Curiosity rover, and some interesting information came out of the Sample Analysis at Mars, or SAM instrument.
Okay.
So SAM can measure gases in the atmosphere, and it can also measure gases that are evolved from samples. So basically, we drill a rock, deliver that powder to the instrument, and then that instrument heats up the sample and measures the gases that are coming off.
Whatever outgasses, it can tell you what that is, right?
Exactly. So a big piece of information from the atmosphere is that we've been tracking methane over the last few Martian years, and what we see is that there is a cycle to it where it spikes late summer, early autumn, and then dips again.
Wow.
Yeah, so the big question is, why is that happening?
So that could possibly be due to an organic material, right? Or a biological source.
Exactly.
Meaning
so
life.
That's right. I know. So huge.
Wow.
It's not the only hypothesis out there.
Sure.
But, you know, there is the possibility that there is extant life on Mars that is creating this methane.
Wow. The fact that NASA has now released information that they've measured a cycle of methane that goes up in the summer and down in the winter, it sounds very similar to how biological processes create methane here on Earth. That could be evidence that there's life right now on Mars.